Grief is one of life's universal experiences, and yet when someone loses a loved one, they often find themselves walking through it alone. British novelist Julian Barnes wrote about his experience after the death of his wife, Pat, to a brain tumor after they had been married for 30 years. Barnes was struck by how many of his closest friends didn't know how to talk honestly about his grief. He shared some friends are as scared of grief as they are of death. They avoid you as if they fear infection. One friend advised him to just get a dog. Some other friends suggested that he just go on a long vacation as he worked through his grief. Perhaps even more painful were those that Barnes called the silent ones. Longtime friends who couldn't even bring themselves to mention his wife's name. In one dinner conversation, he recalls saying her name 3 times, only to be met with silence each time. They denied her 3 times, Barnes writes, and I thought the worse of them for it. This emotional isolation is a common but rarely talked about part of grief, and that is exactly why the ministry we're going to be talking about today is so important. You're watching One Day Closer, where we're learning together how to use our one day closer to eternity to bring the hope and purpose of Jesus to those around us. Let's meet our guest for today. We're in studio today with Jillian Flintosh to talk about Grief Share Ministry. Jillian, thank you so much for being here to talk about this important topic that often doesn't get talked about enough.
Thank you for having me.
You bet, you bet. As we start, we just want to get to know you a little better. Tell us about yourself and your family, Jillian.
Yeah, so I grew up about 30 minutes north of here in Lehighton. But I met my husband in Philadelphia when we were both working, and he's actually from Bethlehem, unbeknownst to me. And when we decided to settle down and raise our family, we decided to come back to the Lehigh Valley. So we've been married almost 14 years, and we've got 3 little ones, a 10-year-old, and then 4-year-old twins.
Oh, wow. How has it been with twins?
It's about what you would expect.
Double the work?
Double the work.
Double the blessing.
Double the blessings, absolutely double the laughs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. So we're going to be talking about Grief Share today.
Yep.
Let's just start with, can you share a little bit about what Grief Share actually is?
Yeah, so Grief Share is a 13-week program, if you want to call it that, that just really is meant to walk people through all the different stages of grief and also just what you might experience on your grief journey, because as we know, grief is not a linear process by any means. And so it just really helps people to connect to those different feelings that they're having dealing with just such a heartbreaking and unique period in their life.
Yeah. And in 2 Corinthians 1, I really appreciate, talks about the God of all comfort comforts us in our afflictions so that we can comfort others in their affliction. And grief has been a part of your story that God's used. So how did you become a Grief Share facilitator? How did that come about?
Yeah, so it's a little bit of a roundabout story, but in March of 2024, my mom passed away suddenly. And I just knew that I wanted to find somewhere to be with other people who had experienced grief. And the reason why is because, first in 2004, my dad passed away suddenly when he was just 53. Wow. And then fast forward to 2016, my husband and I experienced a full-term stillbirth of our son, CJ. And that was just such a profound moment in our lives. And I can still remember being in my hospital room asking, has this happened to other people? It's just a unique kind of loss. And Lehigh Valley Hospital had a pregnancy and infant loss support group that I attended, a couple weeks after his birth. Okay. And that experience just brought such healing. I met other moms who had experienced full-term stillbirth because it's not a common thing.
Yeah.
And I just learned from that experience how important and how healing it was to be around other people who experienced such a unique loss like that. And then as I moved, kept going to the group, I found myself then being able to help others who were new to the group. It's a group you never want to see new people,
Yeah.
but you inevitably do. And so then fast forward to 2024, I was attending Grief Share at our church with my co-facilitator, Rod Zattarelli. And I attended a couple weeks with my brother and my nephew. And then Rod came to me. I've known Rod for a while. And he came to me and he said, I'm not going to be able to be here next week. Do you think maybe you could facilitate? If not, I'll cancel. But and being that I already worked at the church, I'm a children's director there, and knowing him, I said, sure.
Yeah.
And from there, I kind of just became less of a participant and more of a facilitator. And, you know, I joke around with people that that's not something I really thought I wanted to facilitate, but having the losses that I did in my life, I actually just felt called by God that, you know, this is somewhere that you've experienced and you can serve other people. And so, so I've been doing it ever since then.
Wow. I so appreciate your willingness to do that and just inviting us into your story. You know, there's so many people that need the freedom of knowing, yes, other people have been through this. And then to have not just a support group, but a group that's centered around Christ to be part of that healing. That's really special. Yeah. So thank you, Jillian.
Yeah.
We're going to take a quick break and then we'll come back and dig more into it. Stay tuned. We'll be right back to talk more about what it looks like to help meet people in their grief so they can find healing and hope.
You're watching Lighthouse TV, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. This station will feature uplifting faith and family programming.
Programs focusing on defending your faith, defending your freedom, and living as a believer in today's culture.
To find out more about this station and to watch original content, go to lighthousetv.org. Lighthouse TV, positively different television.
Welcome back to One Day Closer. We're here with Jillian Flintosh talking about Grief Share Ministry. So Jillian, we just got to hear some of your story of how grief has been in your life and how God's helped bring healing, and now how He's brought you to a place where you're helping others heal in similar ways. So why is a ministry like Grief Share so valuable?
Oh, so when you go through grief, it is one of the most heartbreaking, unique experiences. And it's just not something you can Google and get help from. That's just not comforting. And a lot of times those around us sometimes aren't comforting either because they don't know what to say and they don't know how to support you. And so I am just such a big advocate of going to a support group like Grief Share, because you can be with others who are just dealing with the same, situation as you are. And it's also not a place that you don't have to be a Christian to come to Grief Share. We've had several people come who actually had walked away from the church at some point in their lives, and a lot of times in the midst of their grief because they were angry with God, who really just felt that pull and have joined us. And it's been, just so wonderful to see them kind of connect back with their faith. And so it is just that unique kind of ministry that everybody will need at some point in their life. And I'm just so happy that we're able to offer that to those just dealing with these heartbreaking losses.
Yes, yeah, that's so great. And I love the fact, and I think we need to do this more, but how do we utilize ministries like this to connect with those who don't know Christ? Because they can experience the hope and the healing that only Christ can provide in community. Wow, that's awesome. What does it look like? What's the process for someone who comes to Grief Share? What does that look like for them?
Yeah. So it's a 13-week program, but each week is self-contained. So I started, I think, when they were on week 4.
Okay.
And it's totally, you're not missing out on anything. It's you can come at any time in the process. I even had a woman come at week 12 one week.
Sure.
Because, you never know when you're going to need that. And so it's a 13-week process, and usually they recommend people go through it twice.
Okay.
Just because a lot of times, especially if you come to see us very new after a loss, your brain's still processing all kinds of things. And so they recommend that you kind of go through it that initial time, and then as I'll say the dust settles a little bit, go through it a second time. You often just pick up different things, and especially depending on where you are in your grief journey, you may have not paid attention to something the first time because that was too much for you to think about, and now you're picking it up again. So, yeah.
Wow. And that's interesting, and Grief Share actually recommends, isn't it a little period of time right after the death to just wait before you come to a class? Is that true?
So typically they don't have a set amount of time that you should wait after you experience a loss. We've had people join us within a couple weeks. We've had people join us after a couple years of their loss.
Yeah.
We will never send anybody home or push anybody away, but we do tend to tell people to give it at least 4, 5, 6 weeks, just so that they kind of have a chance to breathe after all of the funeral and all that kind of stuff. But again, we will never push anybody away whenever they show up, but it is good to just take a little bit of time before you kind of step into that.
Sure. So people are welcome at any time, but it can sometimes be good for them to have a little space and then to come, because there is so much. And just even learning what reality looks like without the loved one that they lost.
Yeah.
What are some of the topics that get covered in the sessions?
Yeah, so there is some of our I don't want to say popular, but one of the sessions that creates a lot of conversation is regrets, anger with God, but then there's also hope and healing, and what does life look like, going forward. In the beginning, our sessions are more about just the shock of everything and how life may look going forward, and preparing us for things that people may say or may not say.
Yes.
But then intertwined through every single session is just how God is always with us, and He, even in our anger and our frustration, He's with us every step of the way, and that we should not hide that from Him. He is there for us, the safe space for us to fall against, because He's holding us the whole time. And so it's just continuing to remind people that you're not alone. Not only do you have us in the room, but God is with you through all of your emotions and all of it.
That's so great. It sounds like even just helping people process through. So if they are angry with God, be able to verbalize that with others who can understand, and then just encouraging with the support that God's big enough to hear that, and still pursue you in it. What are some of the major regrets that people tend to express through after loss of a loved one?
Yeah, so it's often, especially if it's a more sudden death, why wasn't I there? Why didn't we spend more time together? Why did I, yell at him for not picking up the garbage, or those kinds of things?
Yes.
And Grief Share and just talking with others helps to remind them that we're all human, and that, you didn't know in cases of sudden loss. Or we've had people who've had people deal with long diagnosis of cancer or Alzheimer's or things like that. And they would get frustrated, the caregiving that had to go on. And so they would say, I wish I was kinder. I wish I would have had more patience in that moment. And just really talking through all of that and knowing that, again, we're all human, and that anybody in their position would have, had done the same thing, said the same thing. And so just helping them heal from that, and helping them know that it's okay to feel that way, but also know that God's got it, and their loved one's not, in heaven, scolding them or saying, why didn't you do that? Because they know that the love was radiating, and that it was all from a place of love.
Yes, wow. And this, that freedom, to know that they, like you said, they can feel that, but that Christ, that God's forgiveness is available, and they don't have to hold on to that. That's really powerful. Yeah. How do you see, as people move through there, how is Grief Share, the process itself, and we've talked about this a little bit, but helping them to heal through it? So they're sharing, they're in community. Are there any other aspects of it that you see just through the process? Yeah,
so along with Grief Share, you get a participant booklet. I don't even know that I would call it a booklet. It's a book. Booklet to me implies like smaller, so they call it a participant's guide. And so there's all kinds of prompts and questions for people to be able to answer in there, and to just get them thinking about, different aspects of grief and different things that they might encounter, or help them to look deep inside themselves and really try to help them discover what may be holding them back from healing, or what may need to be said that they're kind of holding inside. And so another aspect that they really, I'll say, encourage is the concept of journaling. Journaling can be a really powerful tool when you're dealing with grief, to just kind of be able to get all of your emotions and feelings out there. Over the sessions that we've done, I've been surprised at how many people have said to us, growing up, I was told I wasn't allowed to be mad at God. I wasn't allowed to, be angry or say angry words or anything like that. And Grief Share has helped them, I think, knowing that you can journal, or you can just verbalize to God, and He can take it all. And so I think that, along with kind of going through the steps, just helping people to discover ways that they can, when they're not with us in group, ways that they can express what they're feeling, in journaling and going through Participant's Guide. And even other things, like we've had people who, when dealing with a loss of her husband to cancer, she went to like a music where they were beating like drums and things like that. And it just, that expression to help them get out. So even, people amongst sharing those other different outlets that they've found.
That something might be helpful. So they're not only learning in community, but they're gaining tools for when they're not in community, and when the loneliness can start to set in maybe more deeply. Wow. Yeah. What are some of the most meaningful things you've seen happen in people's lives as they've gone through Grief Share? Yeah,
so the two that come to mind for me are, we have one woman who just has, it's a very intertwined story of a lot of tragedy, and she told us that she didn't feel safe worshiping where she had been worshiping, just because there was just a lot of very delicate topics surrounding the loss and the aftermath of it. And so she actually has started coming to our church and worshiping there because, other than me and Rod, no one knows her story, right? Yeah. And it wouldn't matter anyway, but she just feels so safe to be able to worship at our church, to not have to worry about the judgment or anything like that. And it's been so wonderful to see her come in there and give her a hug in the morning, and just see her face and know that she can kind of breathe for the next hour or so. And then we actually had another woman come as a support person. So we, if anybody's thinking about coming, you are more than welcome to bring another person. It can be, amongst dealing with grief, it can be very intimidating to come to a place where you don't know anybody else and share about such a vulnerable time in your life. So her support person came, and her support person actually had experienced the loss of her mom many years prior.
Yes.
And through the loss of her mom, there was just a lot of turmoil, and she actually turned away from the church, and she actually wanted nothing to do with that, wanted nothing to do with God. But she came with her every single week, and just seeing her kind of go from just being the silent support person to actually sharing and opening up about her own loss and her own feelings was just so beautiful to see, because you could just kind of see layers upon layers kind of come off, being able to finally, say some of these things and be in a safe space. So that was really awesome to see.
Wow. That's amazing. And it's so neat to see how that, like you said, she was coming to visit or to support a friend, and then she's getting support in the process.
Yeah.
And just the reality of, we all, a good friend of mine is a professor at University of Delaware, and he teaches a class on grief and loss. And he just says, there's so much loss in our life, even not just the loss of a loved one, which is maybe the hardest, but just in general, the loss of so many different things and we just don't know how to grieve.
Yeah.
We haven't learned how to grieve well, and that causes problems
Yeah.
emotionally, spiritually, physically,
Yeah.
when we hold on to that and we don't learn how to deal with that.
Yeah.
Wow. Are there any stories? I love the compassion of Christ, right? In the Greek, it's splanchnizomai. He's moved in his guts constantly for just compassion that leads to action, that draws him near to others. Are there any passage in the scripture or just any experiences in your life where you've seen that happen in a cool way, just someone moving into that space?
Yeah, so we've had people come through, Grief Share, who are at the end of it, they want to go help someone else. So
yeah. Oh, love it.
we, one of our ladies, she now, I think, helps mentor, or not mentor, but she serves as kind of a support person for other spouses who are the caregivers of someone going through cancer and kind of their end stage. And so had you talked to her about that when she first started Grief Share, she would have said, no way, no way.
Not doing this.
She went through our program twice, and it was so cool to see the transformation.
Yes.
And then for her to actually say, I think I'm ready to do this, was really neat. And then we've had some other, folks who also are at the end saying, I want to step into something to be able to help other people. And so it's just amazing how Christ kind of pulls us through this horrible thing, but then he sends us.
Yes.
And I just find that so amazing and cool. And even my own story, I look at the same way.
Yeah.
And how he did that. So yeah, it's just neat to see the transformation in people.
Wow. And it feels to me like an aspect of discipleship that should be more prevalent in what we're doing, right? There's experiential training, learning in the context of community, there's healing, and then there's ascending. There's an equipping that's happening.
Yes.
And it's so powerful, right? That's what we're supposed to do in response to the gospel.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Jillian, this was so great. Thank you so much for coming to share about this and just sharing your heart as well.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Stay tuned. We'll be right back to talk about how we can start applying some of these principles to our lives.
You're watching Lighthouse TV, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. This station will feature uplifting faith and family programming.
Programs focusing on defending your faith, defending your freedom, and living as a believer in today's culture.
To find out more about this station and to watch original content, go to lighthousetv.org. Lighthouse TV, positively different television.
John 11:35 says, Jesus wept. This simple but profound verse reminds us that Jesus fully understands our pain. When he stood at the tomb of his friend Lazarus, knowing he would soon raise him from the dead, Jesus still wept. He wept because death is painful. He wept because love causes us to grieve. He wept because of the reality of what sin has done in our world and the brokenness that it's brought. And he wept to show us that mourning is not weakness. It's part of what it means to truly be human. Grief is a journey that none of us want to take, but all of us are going to have to venture on at some point in our lives. Whether your loss is fresh or whether it's from years ago, the weight of it can often linger, and that's why ministries like Grief Share are such a lifeline for you. They offer space, support, and truth for those walking through sorrow. And if you're struggling to find your footing after the loss of a loved one, I just want to share 3 steps that you can take to maybe help you begin to heal. Number 1, don't grieve alone. It's easy to isolate ourselves, but healing often begins in the context of community. Grief Share offers a safe, welcoming space where you can be seen and heard by others who truly understand what you're going through. And whether it's one session or a full season of Grief Share, I just encourage you to take this step of showing up. Find a Grief Share location and show up. Now, number 2, name what you're feeling. Grief isn't a nice, neat thing. It includes anger, regrets, loneliness, fear, and Grief Share helps you process these emotions with weekly topics and guided conversations. And it reminds you that what you're feeling is not only normal, but it's something that you need to work through so that you can experience the healing and hope that God has for you. And then 3rd, trust that God is near. Even when you feel distant from him, God is present in your pain. And through reading the Bible, through prayer, through community, you'll begin to see that God has never left you, but he's always been pursuing you and that he has not forgotten you. Grief is hard, but it's not hopeless. And Jesus in you and you in Christian community means that you don't have to walk through it alone. Every day, God brings us one day closer to the day when the fullness of all that Jesus has done for us as the resurrection and life will be enjoyed and experienced in his presence with no more sorrow or suffering or pain. And I pray that God gives you a taste of that right now as you wait for the day when you get to feast on that for all eternity. Thank you so much for joining us for One Day Closer, where we're learning together how to use our one day closer to eternity to bring Jesus-infused hope and purpose to those around us.